All right, here we go. He'll run it out to the 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game. Auburn's going to win the football game.
Dobbs, drops back, looks, loads up, fires long for the end zone. The pass is going to be caught by Tennessee.
Tennessee wins!
Caught it by Tennessee, Jawan Jennings. Jennings makes the catch in the end zone on the Hail Mary.
I don't believe I saw that.
To the right, Bennett to tight end left. Second and goal to go from the 2. Toss sweep right for James White. Cuts it under the right arm, cuts it upfield. Driving forward, diving to the goal line. A touchdown and a title for the Patriots.
I can't believe it.
They have completed the greatest comeback in Super Bowl history.
This is the Saturday 6. Thank you all for joining us on a conference championship Saturday as the college football playoff will be decided today. It all comes down to this. We're not waiting another week. There's not really anything else to be determined. Tonight we'll know who is going and who's going to a different bowl. I'm now joined by my co-host for the evening, Chris Mason. Chris, how are you?
I'm doing great. Good morning, CJ. How's it going?
It's going well. We have got just an incredible slate of games today. I'm telling you, 12:30, Big 12 Championship. That's when you turn your TV on, get your bowl of chili, your bowl of soup, maybe some chips and salsa, and just watch for the next 11 hours and be dazzled at the incredible slate of college football we have got today. So we've got 4 college games coming up for you this morning, and then we're going to give you 2 NFL games that I think are going to be incredibly intriguing tomorrow, as the NFL is kind of in this, we know where the AFC is, we know who's going there, and the NFC, you've got the Eagles, and then just this incredible mess of teams, and really even the good teams you don't know for sure are going. So tomorrow, NFL's got some really interesting things happening. Let's start with the Big 12 Championship. This game is at 12:30. Texas Christian versus Oklahoma. The line, believe it or not, is Sooners -7. Seems high to me, and the over-under here is 63.5. Chrissy, here's Sooners -7. Baker Mayfield, first Big 12 Championship in a long time for the Big 12. What do you see with this one?
That line is actually about where I thought it would be. Look, these teams just played less than a month ago, and Oklahoma wore them out. I mean, it wasn't
true
18-point game, but I think it was even, if you look at it on paper and kind of see how the teams were playing, I think Oklahoma could have won that game by 30. So the difference here is this is a noon game, and it's at a quote-unquote neutral site. Basically, I think it's real close to Texas Christian.
Yeah, so I mean, this game, you look at it coming in. You mentioned the game a few weeks ago when they played. And Oklahoma went on to win that one, 38-20 in that. The interesting thing about this, Chris, is TCU is 1-6 straight up in its last 7 games against the Sooners, including that match a couple weeks ago. When they meet, this game tends to go in favor of Oklahoma. But the interesting thing here, though, Oklahoma 11-1, TCU 10-2. Both teams are 7-5 against the spread this year, so they've both been pretty equal. Now, the matchup we had last time they met, I think we're going to get it again. It's Oklahoma's high-powered offense with Heisman favorite Baker Mayfield, and then you've got this TCU defense. Oklahoma averages 45 points a game. TCU's defense only allows 15 points a game. Chris, I do like Oklahoma in this one, but I think there's something to this being a rematch. Could we see TCU's defense give Baker Mayfield some different looks today?
Yeah, we actually see a rematch of teams that have played twice today. So, of course, it's going to happen when Auburn and Georgia play. Matter of fact, they played the same date that Auburn and Georgia played the same date that TCU and Oklahoma played, the 11th of November. and my point of saying all that is the team that loses that game, especially they get to wore out like both Georgia and TCU did, learns the most. Learns where their holes are, learns where they can be beat. Meanwhile, the team that just goes out and pounds the other team, they don't really get much to take away from that. You learn more from your losses than you do your wins.
No, I completely agree with that. And, I think TCU is coming into this game super motivated since that Oklahoma loss. Now, you look at TCU, last week they played Baylor, and this is kind of the thing about TCU that's maybe different than a few weeks ago. The offense is starting to find some momentum, and I know it's Baylor, but Kenny Hill, the Texas A&M transfer, threw for over 300 yards. TCU went on to score 45 points. Oklahoma, on the other hand, since that loss to Iowa State, they have looked like the best team in the country, and that's why I've had them that high in my power rankings for the past several weeks. Since that loss, they've won each of their last 7 games, and they've gone 4-1 against the spread in their last 5. Baker Mayfield has been unbelievable this year. He enters the Big 12 championship game for throwing over 4,000 passing yards, 37 touchdowns, and only has 5 interceptions on the year. He's been absolutely incredible. Chris, line, Sooners -7, over under 63.5. Give us your pick.
All right, I'm taking the Sooners to win the game. I think it's going to be relatively close throughout, but the Sooners kind of pull away at the end, maybe with a late touchdown. I've got it going 44 Oklahoma to 30 TCU.
The over-under here is 63.5, and that part scares me because a lot of times in these conference championship games, in these primetime games, there's longer commercial breaks. These games, typically, a Big 12 game is going to take you about 3 to 3.5 hours. This one's going to border closer to 3.5 to 4 hours. So the longer the game is, I think always tends to favor the defense in this case. And the last time they met, we had 58 points scored, which was under. I'm going to take the under here, and I think we're actually going to see a defensive battle between these two, and it's going to be a little uncomfortable for the Sooners. I do think Baker Mayfield is the difference, so give me Oklahoma in a defensive battle, 24-16 over TCU. All right, let's move on to our next game, the SEC Championship. This one, to me, is the best game of the evening between Georgia and Auburn, the rematch. Now, you think Georgia and Auburn won that one 40-17 earlier in the year, right? Well, Vegas has Auburn favored, but only by 1 point. And the over-under here, 47.5. Chris, little surprised by this line?
No. Not at all. Like I said, you learned more from your losses. That game was in Auburn with a huge home field advantage. A Donald Trump huge home field advantage. So, no, I'm not surprised at this line, and I think Georgia has every chance to win this game just as much as Auburn.
No, I absolutely agree with what you're saying. I think in college football, it is so difficult to beat the same team twice in a season when you have comparable talent. And the way Auburn embarrassed Georgia, and Auburn did it on their home field, I think that makes it incredibly difficult for Gus Malzahn to drive home any points. I mean, imagine addressing your team coming off a big game and you're trying to address a weakness. They're like, what weakness? We beat Georgia by 23 points. We've got no weaknesses. And Georgia, on the other hand, they went into that game and they got smashed. They're going to listen to whatever Kirby Smart tells them to do. With all of that said, Auburn's been absolutely fantastic over these past 5 games. They're 3-1-1 against the spread in these past 5. Quarterback Jarrett Stidham, by the way, has completed 72% of his passes, averaging 234 yards per game in the winning streak. Stidham has thrown 8 touchdowns and 2 interceptions in that span of just the past 5 games. It's been absolutely incredible. Now, you look at the Bulldogs, Georgia, Kirby Smart. They've been a fantastic wager this year 8-4 against the spread this season. That's a really nice number to put up. Despite the loss a few weeks ago, Georgia is 3-1 against the spread in their last 4 meetings with Auburn. So they've actually performed a little well. Chris, one of the criticisms of Georgia going into that last game was that they're too one-dimensional. And Auburn's front seven would eat up this running game. And that's exactly what we saw. Do we get anything different today?
I hope so, because if they try to pound the middle, it's not gonna work.
Nope.
Georgia's going to have to resort to some, not necessarily trickery, but just a little bit different. Maybe run some triple option type things, some run pass options, to try to spread out the defense a little bit. They're going to have to get around the edges. If not, Auburn's just going to stymie them up front again.
Yeah. Completely agree. I don't think you can just pound the ball across the middle and beat Auburn in this one. That defensive front seven, and I know Alabama's Alabama, but honestly, if you're being honest when you watch the games, Auburn, I think, has the best defensive front seven in the country right now, and you're seeing it week in and week out. Now, the interesting thing here is everybody talks about Georgia and that running game and the quarterbacks and Kirby Smart, but Georgia's actually been incredible on defense. They're 5th in the country, just allowing 14 points per game. Auburn, by the way, offensively is averaging 37 points per game. That's good for 19th in the country. And Chris, Kerryon Johnson, that Auburn running back who had a great game against Georgia a few weeks ago, he's a game time decision. How big of a deal is it if Auburn has to go against Georgia and either without Kerryon Johnson, or if he's there, they're going to be using a banged up Kerryon Johnson?
Big deal. I think it may be worse if he plays, if he's not 100%, just because he won't be able to get around the corners. He won't be able to pivot like he should be. So I think that it's a gigantic deal. I'll tell you what, though. Here's the bigger deal to me, and when I give you my spread here, this is kind of the deciding factor in who I think is going to win the game. Last week, Auburn had to play Alabama. They had to put everything they had into prepping and getting ready mentally for that game, physically for the game. Meanwhile, Georgia's last 2 games have been Kentucky, who I love, but not really a considerable talent when it comes to facing Georgia, and then Georgia Tech, who is a decent ACC team, but not really on Georgia's level. So they're not looking at those games thinking we really have to put a lot into it. They're just thinking we have to get in here, smash these teams, win, and we're going to have a chance in 2 weeks to play either Auburn or Alabama again, and that's exactly what happened. So they have been preparing for this game for 4 weeks.
I'm going to push back a little bit on that, Chris, because Georgia Tech runs that triple option offense, and it is very difficult to prepare for. That is why certain ACC teams, Duke being one of those, they will schedule a team like an Army or a Navy the week before they have to play Georgia Tech, knowing that they're going to use that as a prep game. So I do think, I think you're onto something with that, not having to play some of the elite talent, and that's allowed some of their players to heal. But I think from a preparation standpoint, I think Georgia was on their heels last week trying to prep for that Georgia Tech team that can be a little bit sneaky at times.
38-7. I don't know how bad they were on their heels.
Well, no, I mean, they dominated them. They definitely did. But I think a lot of that was the talent advantage that Georgia had. So, no, it's definitely interesting. So the line here, Auburn -1, incredibly close. Over under 47.5. Winner, by the way, likely into the college football playoff. Chris, where do you go?
I'm taking Georgia on this one by a field goal, 23-20.
We are so close on this one. I also have a field goal line, but I'm going with Auburn and Jarrett Stidham. Listen, when I'm given one-dimensional offense versus two-dimensional offense, and I'm giving equal talent, I'm going to take the two-dimensional offense. I get the better front seven in Auburn. Now, I do think Georgia's defense makes this interesting, especially if Kerryon Johnson isn't good to go. And make no mistake, Auburn's not scoring 40 points in this game. That's not going to happen. Jarrett Stidham's going to have an uncharacteristic interception, possibly early. And Georgia, I think, gets off to a nice lead early on in this game. But I think Auburn, second half adjustments, comes back and dominates the second half and wins this one 27-24. That over-under, by the way, 47.5. I think Vegas is right on the money with that line. I think it's going to be right around there. All right, let's go to the ACC championship game. Chris, 3 weeks ago, this looked like it was going to be an absolute dandy. Now everybody's like, oh, everybody's in love with Clemson. And the line here is Tigers minus 9.5 over Miami. Over under 46.5. I look at that, I'm not surprised at all. Miami, I started selling a few weeks ago. They went into Pittsburgh. They really struggled. I think they're going to struggle here too. Are you surprised by the line?
I thought the line was going to be a little bit closer. I thought it was going to be maybe 7.5.
That's still a big line.
Yeah, it's in that range. Obviously, look, Miami has to travel a long way to come up in North Carolina. Clemson, it's a couple hours away. So not too bad of travel for them. It's essentially going to be a home game for Clemson, except for the atmosphere that they have at Death Valley.
No, I think you're absolutely right. Now, one note, and I don't know how much of an impact this is going to have at all, but when we were at the Duke-Miami game, there were quite a few Miami fans, and I talked to a lot of them. A lot of them actually were from Charlotte. So there may be something to there being Miami fans in Charlotte, and so the home field advantage people are talking about maybe won't be as drastic, but make no mistake, this will still be a home game for Clemson. The interesting thing here, Chris, past 7 games, Miami's 2-5 against the spread. They just haven't been good. And I do like this team. I picked them to make the playoff early or at the start of the year, but are they maybe a little overrated right now?
I don't know. I mean, I think maybe that Pittsburgh loss was a little bit calculated, knowing that they're into the championship game, and really they just have to win that game. So it might have been just kind of called a trap game, if you will, but more so just, hey, we don't really need to pay too much attention to this. It doesn't matter if we win or lose. Let's take it easy and take a nice little trip and get ready for Clemson. So other than that, there's no blemishes. I mean, they crushed a lot of good teams this year. So I'm not putting anything by them.
One thing about Clemson, everybody likes to bring up that loss to Syracuse, which I've told people, don't even watch that game. Don't go back and watch tape of it. It was an absolute fluke. Since that game, Clemson has won 5 straight. They're 3-1-1 against the spread with an average win margin, check this out, of 24 points. They've just been dominating teams. I also think this could be a really easy day for the running back, Travis. I can never get his last name right, but I think it's Etienne, and mobile quarterback Kelly Bryant. The Hurricanes defense allows 152 rushing yards per game. That's a lot. They do not defend the run well, and Clemson likes to use a lot of that read option, read pass, or run pass option. They used it against South Carolina last weekend. I think you're going to see a lot of that today as well. Now, offensively, Clemson ranks 25th in the country, and Miami does have an incredible defense that ranks 15th in the country, just allowing 18 points per game. Chris, this over-under is 46.5. Vegas is telling you it's going to be back and forth. Do you foresee any type of high-scoring or low-scoring affair with this one?
I think it's going to be relatively low-scoring. I think Miami's defense is going to show up, perhaps cause some turnovers. Clemson isn't known to be turnover prone, but Miami can get in there and really stir up some stuff on defense and special teams to cause turnovers. So I see that happening, and I think it's going to be probably relatively low scoring. Besides that, I would take the under.
Yeah, and one thing about this, Malik Rozier, the Hurricanes quarterback, has been incredibly inconsistent throughout the year. And then Miami, this just happened 2 days ago, right before our Wednesday podcast. Miami's receiver, Ahmad Richards, out for the year with the meniscus injury. So that's their star receiver. That's a big time deal to lose him going into this game. I think that creates a lot of issues. Chris, line here, Clemson favored by 9.5. Over under again 46.5. Give us your pick.
I've got Miami in the upset.
Miami in the upset.
Miami in the upset, 21-17.
Wow. There it is. 21-17 Miami from Chris. I'm going to take Clemson to win this one. I think they will physically dominate Miami the way they did South Carolina. I think Kelly Bryant in this running game gets off to an early start, and Malik Rozier is just going to struggle in this one. Clemson, by the way, doesn't turn the ball over a lot. Miami relies on turnovers. You're not getting them against the Tigers. I think that's why this line is as high as it is. And my theory has always been when Vegas gives you a line that seems a little unrealistic, they're telling you they have so much faith in that team that they're going to give you that line. And so when they do that, they're banking on that team to win so that a lot of the bettors will bet the other team. So Vegas, they're the ones that make money, build the casinos. I'm going to roll with them. Give me Clemson 27-10 over Miami. All right, next game, Big Ten Championship, Ohio State, Wisconsin. The line, Buckeyes -6, over under 51. Chris, I've been harsh on Wisconsin all year long. They don't have a big time win. Vegas agrees with me. What do you think?
Gosh, I don't know. It's hard to root against this defense, man. They have allowed 12 points a game the entire season.
They're incredible.
Astonishing. Yeah. And Minnesota, who's not a terrible team, 0 points. Michigan, 10 points. Iowa, 14 points. Are top 25 team there. Indiana, who's played a lot of teams well, 17 points. I mean, gosh, that's tough.
No, you are absolutely right. The defense has been good. Where I push back on the defensive argument, though, is even including Michigan, they've only faced one top 50 offense in the country, and that was Florida Atlantic, who's put together a lot of yards against CUSA teams. So I don't really look at Wisconsin's I think the defense is great, okay? I think it's top 10 for sure. But I don't think when it comes to playing an elite level team like Ohio State, they're going to be as effective as they have been in these 12 games against far inferior opponents. Now, they did shut out Minnesota, and that was absolutely impressive. But the Badgers don't have a good recent history against Ohio State. They're 0-5 straight up and 1-4 against the spread in their last 5 meetings. That's definitely a concern. Chris, one of the things that concerns me about Ohio State is they're a roller coaster team. They look great against Penn State. They looked absolutely awful in Iowa, and Iowa scored 55 points against them. That to me is a big deal. When you look at what Wisconsin is doing, and you look at right now Ohio State and JT Barrett, are you a little bit concerned about what JT Barrett has done with this roller coaster season?
CJ, you're breaking up a little bit on me. Hopefully it's not on my end. Question about JT Barrett. I don't have too much against him. I mean, he's got 33 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. I think that's pretty strong. So I think he's fine. I think he's going to be good to play. No issues there.
So no issues there with JT Barrett. Having a little technical difficulties. I do apologize for that. We'll see if we can't get those hammered out for you and try and get everything fixed here before we end this podcast. Ohio State favored by 6. The over-under here 51. Chris, where do you go with this one?
Gosh, this is the one I'm not sure about, man. 6 points, that's tough. I'll tell you what, I think Ohio State's going to win this game, but give it to me by a field goal. I'm going to go 24-21.
So Chris goes 24-21. We're going to try and figure out these audio issues that we are having. I do apologize for that. I'm going to go with here in this one. I'm going to pick Ohio State to win this 23-20 over the Badgers. I just think JT Barrett is going to be too good for this defense. And I also think the other issue we're going to get into is Wisconsin doesn't have enough offense to beat Ohio State. So I'm going to take the Buckeyes to win this one, although I do think it will be close. So I'm taking Wisconsin to cover. Give me Ohio State 23, Wisconsin 20. And let's move on to our other game. Panthers at Saints. The line here is New Orleans -5 with an over-under of 48. Chris, hear that line? Seems a little bit crazy, doesn't it?
All right, the Saints, I think, after they just played a few weeks ago, that they blew them out. But since then, the Panthers have really started to figure some things out with 4 straight wins, beating Tampa Bay, Atlanta, Miami, and the Jets. So it seems like they really have gotten the ball rolling, and I think that's the reason why the line is a lot closer than many people might expect.
Yeah, well, I mean, Saints -5 with the home field advantage does seem a little bit closer than maybe what people are thinking. And then you get Cam Newton's game last week. Absolutely awful. Completed just 11 of 23 pass attempts for 168 yards and had a quarterback rating of 59.8. He's had 4 games this year with the quarterback rating under 60. That to me is awful. You look at what the Saints are doing this year. They reeled off an 8-game winning streak before falling last week in LA 26-20. They've got a dominant running attack between Mark Ingram and then incredible rookie, Alvin Kamara, who looks incredible, averaging 142 yards a game. The Saints rushing game is. And the Saints are 7-4 against the spread this year, which is absolutely incredible as well. Chris, are the Saints up for a real playoff team? I mean, could they make a real run at Philadelphia and possibly win the NFC?
Oh, I think so, for sure. If somehow they can squeeze out home field advantage, where you used to have issues with the Saints, and it hasn't been so much of an issue this year, is when they got outside of the dome. You had Drew Brees, who was amazing in the dome, playing or in good weather, but they didn't really have a lot of success on the ground. The addition of Kamara to give Ingram a little bit of time off has improved Ingram's ability, and then Kamara has been astonishing, especially in kind of the open field. So, yeah, I think they can definitely give the Eagles a run, especially if the Eagles may run into another loss here and Saints can get home field advantage through the playoffs.
No, I completely agree with that. I think you're definitely onto something with that. I mean, this looks like right now one of the best teams in the NFC. Now, the Panthers, talk about Cam Newton struggles, talk about this offensive struggles. They did win last week, and they look good doing it, except for Cam Newton looks awful. How much of a concern is that for you, Chris, that Cam Newton has been down the past couple of weeks and has just been kind of a roller coaster this year? Sometimes he's great, other times he posts a quarterback rating of under 60.
Well, it's his emotional self, I'll tell you. I mean, he's kind of up and down himself as a person, saying weird things, being in the media for saying things about certain women and responding in certain ways. So I think it's more just him kind of being Cam Newton. So I don't know that you're going to see too much different from him going forward either.
Yeah.
More baggage than I think he's worth, in my opinion.
Agreed. Let's get to our pick here. Saints -5, over under 48. Chris, where do you go with this?
5 is such a funny line, CJ. It's got me thinking a little bit, but I'm going to take the Saints by a touchdown, 27-20.
Oh my gosh, we're close. We are brutally close. I've got the Saints winning this one 28-20. So off by 1 point literally, and that over-under, I think that over-under, Chris, is right on the money. Like, people don't realize this. Carolina has a really good defense, and that's why they've played so well these past several weeks. And that's honestly been a big duct tape cover-up for what Cam Newton has done. So I'm going to take the Saints to win 28-20 in that one. All right, last game, Eagles at Seahawks. This should be just a dandy. Chris, in Seattle, and I know you like home underdogs. Eagles favored by 5.5. Over under here is 47. The last time Seattle was a home underdog, it was October 14th, 2012. They played the Patriots. Chris, the Seahawks won that one 24-23. This line seems absolutely insane. What do you think of it?
I don't see where this line came from. I don't see how they're a home underdog. And even if I can see maybe a point or two, but 5.5, it's ridiculous. And I know your thing is, probably what you're going to tell me is when Vegas throws you a line that you don't understand, take it the way that you don't understand how it is. So you're going to say put your money on the Eagles. I'll tell you, I have a steadfast rule, and that is if a team is at home and they're an underdog, you bet on them. And last week, that worked very well for me in college football, going 3-1. All home teams that we had on the show last week were underdogs, and two of them, if I can remember right, two of them actually won the game. That's what I'm seeing with this. The 12th man is a real thing. Relatively small for an NFL stadium, but they get loud in Seattle.
No, you're absolutely right about that. They do. Here's the thing about Seattle, and I do love Vegas. Sometimes I think Vegas does get a little crazy and a little in over their head, per se. So Seattle is 10-1 against the spread on their last 11 games as a home underdog. They also won 8 of those games outright. As an underdog overall, they're on a brilliant run, and they are 23-9-2 against their spread in their last 34 games as an underdog. The record in primetime, by the way, in night games, 22-5-3 against the spread in their last 30 games at night. That's incredible. Now, I know everybody loves the Eagles, and if you would have told me at the start of the year this team would be 10-1, they'd be maybe the best team in the NFL, I would have said you're nuts. But evidently they are that. Here's the one area where I push back on Philly with. Their competition's not been very good. Their opponents' combined record is 42-68. That's bad. Their only team they have beaten that has a winning record are the Panthers. And the Panthers, I don't think, are a legitimate playoff team. Now, I love Carson Wentz. He's been incredible, averaging 240 yards a game, 28 touchdowns, only 5 picks. Carson Wentz has been insane. But you're talking about going into Seattle, playing against this defense, albeit they're beat up, but against this home field, and he's in his second year. Chris, I don't buy that.
Okay, good. I think you're on my side on this one. I know. I think you're right. You've got a relatively young quarterback. You've got a very experienced defense, very experienced secondary, and they play great at home and at night. I didn't know the stats behind it, but you just kind of have a feeling like going to Seattle to play a night game, it's not going to end well for the team coming in.
No, it doesn't. All right, prediction here. Line Eagles -5.5. Have an idea of where you're going. Over under 47. Chris, give us your pick.
I might shock you a little bit here. Not only am I taking the Seahawks, I'm taking the Seahawks big. I think they're going to win this game 31-10.
Wow, 31-10. Now, I like Seattle. I think Russell Wilson, people like to call him a game manager. I think he's much, much more than a game manager. I think he's a star quarterback, a potential Hall of Famer. I've never bought into that mentality. I don't know that they're going to put up 31 against its pass rush, and I do think the Eagles have multiple offensive weapons. So this is going to be a back and forth game. The Eagles are going to have a real chance to win it. They may even have a real chance to cover here. It's not that crazy. 5.5 could be 27-20 in favor of Philly, so that wouldn't be nuts. But my prediction here is with the home team, with the Seahawks, with Russell Wilson in a primetime game. Give me Seattle 27-24. Chris, thanks for joining us. Any closing thoughts on this conference championship Saturday?
Yes, I've got a quick question for you. Let's assume that Oklahoma wins. And it doesn't really matter who wins in the SEC or who wins in the ACC. I think both those teams are in. And Ohio State wins. Who are you giving the fourth entrance to?
Oh, Alabama. Absolutely.
Right. Here's my thinking. The SEC game has a lot to do with who gets in the fourth pick. And the reason for that is Auburn just beat pretty handily Alabama. If Auburn wins, they can't really allow Alabama to get in. Or excuse me, if Auburn loses, because Auburn at that point would be out, and Alabama just got beat by Auburn, and they would be out. So if Georgia wins, Alabama's out.
I don't think so, because I think the way the committee's going to look at this is Alabama and Georgia haven't played, and Alabama, when they played Auburn, was missing a lot of linebackers, so now you're going to give them, there's going to be 5 weeks in between their game with Auburn and their that first round playoff game, so Alabama gets a chance to heal. I don't think the committee necessarily makes decisions based on that. I think what the committee is going to do here is they're just going to look at, okay, who are the 4 best teams in the game right now? And I think if you look at that, if Auburn gets beat by Georgia, I think Alabama's the 3rd or 4th best team in college football. And by the way, the committee can now come back because Auburn smoked Georgia at home. If Georgia comes back and beats them in the SEC championship, the committee can come back and say, well, Auburn's home field advantage is just absolutely enormous, and Alabama wasn't going to go in there and win that game the same way Georgia didn't. But if you put them on a neutral field, they could say Alabama's better, because look what Georgia would have done if they beat them in the SEC championship.
Very interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out.
No, I think you're absolutely right. It seems like, we could have complete chaos tonight. We could. It could also be Clemson wins, Auburn wins, Oklahoma wins, and Wisconsin wins, and then there's not really much to talk about tomorrow besides the 4 teams that we all thought would get in.
Yep.
So it's going to be a wild Saturday today. I'm excited to watch it. And then the NFL tomorrow, I think, is going to be absolutely fantastic. We've got 2 primetime games and a lot of teams just fighting for spots to get into this playoff. I want to thank you guys for joining us. We will be back live Wednesday, CJ Sweat Show, 7 p.m. Mark it on your calendar. This is the Saturday 6. Have a good